Remember, along with that, you might want to talk about H.L. Mencken, the essayist, who didn't call them the bourgeoisie, he called them the bourgeoisie. And in 1920, a boob was an idiot person, okay? An idiot meaning like stupid acting. Which was not 1920s entertainment, movies, radio, sports, television. Television. Television is not an American thing until the 50s. Okay, it's after World War II. I know it's invented before that, but Americans don't participate in watching TV until the 50s. The Scopes trial, that's a whole creation issue. The teacher teaches evolution in Tennessee, which forbid it, so they have a trial. There's a cartoon that was on one year called The Rise and Fall, and there are 4 pictures. The first picture on the left is a picture of a monkey. This next picture is a picture of a Neanderthal man. The third picture is Socrates, and I think it's labeled Socrates, but it's a guy in a Greek toga. And then the fourth picture is William Jennings Bryan. And the whole thing deals with the nation splitting over the teaching of evolution. Okay? That's fundamentalism, is teaching creation. Darwinism is teaching evolution. In the 1920s, there was kind of a back to conservative religion movement. Prohibition. When it was passed in 1919, it didn't go into effect for almost a year. And prohibition only said that you could not make, sell, or buy, or transport liquor. You could drink what you had. So people who had a lot of money stocked up with liquor like crazy. People who were poor, of course, could not. Why did it lack backing? Well, you know, most of the working class Americans wanted to drink. Rich people wanted to drink themselves. They just didn't want poor people drinking because they might have accidents when they worked in their factories. Okay? Why was it controversial? Does the government really have the right to say that people shouldn't be able to drink at all? Is the question. The outcome of it, it ends with the 21st Amendment. The 18th Amendment is the one that installs prohibition. Then Congress passes the Volstead Act, which provides for the enforcement of the prohibition by the Treasury Department. Okay. It was underfunded. They didn't have enough money to really enforce prohibition. A criminal element arises in the South. That's where we get NASCAR racers. They souped up cars to run bootleg liquor through the hills, the mountains of Tennessee and stuff, and they would run big hot rod cars, and that ends up being NASCAR after Prohibition ends. 1928 election, Hoover versus Smith. Why does the election show an anti-Catholic sentiment? Right, Smith was very popular with Catholics, so he ends up losing the election, and Hoover wins. And so people were afraid to vote for Smith for fear that he would let the Pope run America. One other thing about this election, Smith is a wet, Hoover is a dry, keep prohibition. Smith wants to get rid of it, okay? The causes of the Depression, what industry hadn't recovered before the Depression during the 1920s, and that was farming. Causes of the Depression, weak farm income. By mid-1920s, there were weak construction industry. By the later 1920s, there was too much, what's the word I want? Too many consumer goods still being produced and not enough consumers. Okay, people had purchased what they needed to purchase. You bought a telephone for your house. You didn't replace it every 6 months like some of you replace your iPhones or whatever. Okay, there weren't as many consumer goods, but the ones that were available, people had purchased. And then, of course, there's the whole stock speculation, where people were buying stocks, but not even with money, they were buying it with credit. The bonus march, what was it? So after the Depression starts, the World War I veterans are promised a bonus in 1940s, and they want the government to give it to them early. So they come to Washington, D.C. to propose to Congress or to lobby Congress to do that. The Congress turns them down, so some of the people go home, but some of them still stay in Washington, and Hoover wants them contained in this area called Anacostia Flats. And he sends MacArthur to contain them, but MacArthur decides it's just better to clear them out, so he goes in with tanks and tear gas. And what does it show? It's kind of a bad picture when you see the Army attacking veterans. Now, none were killed, but nonetheless, it doesn't make a pretty picture. So Hoover's painted as this cruel, unfeeling, uncaring person. As the Depression worsened and people were having to cover themselves up at night with newspapers to stay warm, they called them Hoover blankets. They were making houses out of boxes and things, and they called those Hoovervilles, people living in tents, etc. Hoover's response to the Depression, it was all caused by foreign influences. The federal government's not responsible for helping take care of citizenry. That's the job of local and state government. We need to balance the budget no matter what. Finally, late in his, right before the 1932 election, he passes the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which took federal money and gave it to banks to give to businesses. It was too little money, too late. Farmers Holiday Association happened under Hoover too. Farmers wanted price supports. They weren't getting them, so they literally dumped milk out into the dirt. They butchered hogs and then, made sure they got spoiled so that people couldn't eat them. They dumped grain into the mud to prevent it from being, used by people for food. Did it get them what they wanted? No. In fact, it engendered a lot of negative feelings because there were a lot of people who were pretty darn hungry, and they see pictures of farmers pouring thousands of gallons of milk out and defiling pig meat and etc. And it wasn't a good thing. Cartoon on the Republican Party in the 1930s suggests that it was dead or dying. In the 1930s, if you wanted to win an election, you did not run as a Republican, that's for sure. The New Deal, most important thing it did, gosh, I don't know. What do you think the most important thing the New Deal did? What? Okay, public works program, so it provided for jobs. You could argue it was regulation of banking industry, which is the first thing that FDR does when he gets into office. Is he does the bank holiday, which does some banking regulation. No, that's Eisenhower in the 50s. Okay. Takes care of old people with Social Security eventually. Helps farmers not with price supports, but with paying them not to grow crops. Oh, thanks. So those kinds of things are the important things, which is not a New Deal program. Okay, listen. Which of the following is not a New Deal program? A, Social Security. B, CCC. C, the Agricultural Adjustment Act. D, Medicare. E, TVA. Medicare. They try to trick you up with that question. They want you to know Medicare is the 1960s, Social Security is the 1930s, okay? So Social Security came first in the 30s, Medicare comes last in the 60s. What was the New Deal least effective in decreasing unemployment? What really decreased unemployment was the fact that World War II begins in Europe and we get to be the great arsenal for democracy, as President Roosevelt calls it, and it strengthens our economy.